Welcome to another episode of Live from the Wish House with me, Chris Spinner. If you're a regular, welcome back. And if you're new and joining us for the first time, I'm so happy you're here. My path profoundly changed when my son was diagnosed with autism. My marriage collapsed, and I began to develop my own Chris-losophies to navigate and thrive. I'm here to connect with you so we can share and learn together and open our minds to creating the life we love to live. So please subscribe, like, share, and most importantly, comment below because I'd love to hear your thoughts, feelings, and your stories. I would be remiss as I am recording this episode in the month of April, which is also known as Autism Awareness Month. I would be remiss if I didn't do one episode concerning autism. I'm going to call this episode loosely Thoughts from an Autism Mom, or Lessons I Continue to Learn. Things I've been thinking about lately. A lot of people don't love the Autism Awareness Month. Lots of criticisms come around it. I don't have a problem with it. So many parents saying autism awareness is 365 days a year. Yeah, I get it. That's true. Lots of parents, why are we asking for acceptance? Why do we have to still ask for understanding? Aren't those things just a given? I say no, but I say no in the most positive of ways. All of those month designations, every month has a designation, and it doesn't just have one. There's usually about 5 to 10 designations, and we grasp onto what's important for us, and we use it to share our experiences. I like the focus of Autism Awareness Month. It gives me a chance to post stories about my son, to share ideas, to share tips, to make people just a little more aware that we're here for 30 days out of the 365. It works for me. And I think it's sad that we have to ask for understanding and empathy and acceptance for anyone that is somehow marginalized by a variety of different things. But that's the way of the world, and I'm happy to grasp on to the concept. You know, people with autism are people with every single human characteristic and need and want and emotion that we come to the planet with. It's no different. It simply presents differently. It's the skill set or the regulation of body and spirit. How we perceive and react, therein lies the difference. People with autism have a different set of regulations, but you'll find that things that are either problematic, situational to a person with autism are really the same things that are problematic or situational to us who don't carry a diagnosis of autism. It's just kind of manifesting in another way. People used to say that to me when my son was first diagnosed, and I didn't get it because all I really saw was my son, my precious, beautiful son, who I already understood and accepted simply because he was my son. But I did see his differences. I did focus on his differences. I did think he was different than me. And I set out to help him to survive and thrive in a world where he was different. But the more I grew in this journey, now my son is 31 years old, the more I see that it is exactly right. We are obviously all human beings with the same wants and needs, the same things, emotions, love. We want to be cared for. We want to be accepted. All of the things that we want, a person who is diagnosed with autism has as well, wants as well, exists as we do. It's just that their process presents different than ours. Their way of experiencing things is different than the way we experience things. And once I feel you realize that as a parent of a child or simply a person living on the planet with people who have profound needs of all kind. And that's not to say that all people with autism have profound needs. as we know now, as we didn't know before. My son was first diagnosed, there wasn't a real talk about a spectrum or an arc. Once that idea was introduced, I loved it. I felt very comfortable with that arc feeling, that Anthony was placed somewhere on there, because Anthony had skills that other children at that time didn't have, and had less skills than other children at that time had. And of course, there's the verbal component. Some children aren't going to be able to actually speak. Some children are going to be able to actually speak. So I loved it that I was on some sort of rainbow continuum of he places here or he can place kind of here, and we could get the interventions or the support that we needed so that he could live a life that was full and a life that he deserved. But Anthony does fall on the profound side. To me, a child who is profoundly affected is one that is not going to be able to live independently without care from someone else. And that would be my son. And that has its levels, for lack of a better word, of how impaired the person is and how much care they're going to need to receive. But my son needs to be cared for. He could never live an independent life, but that doesn't mean that he's not independent in skills. And it doesn't mean that he doesn't have so much that he is able to share and to give. It's just a matter of tapping into that. So I love having the 30 days to kind of throw some thoughts out there and to ask for the understanding, ask for the acceptance, and provide some of the education for that. Because what's wrong with asking for some understanding? See, in the world I live in Chrislandia, we're called upon to lend a helping hand to each other. I mean, I think that's foundational for me. I speak about it all the time with my friends in terms of everything, in terms of all sorts of people who are in need of anything, in terms of political leanings. Everything for me begins with the foundation of empathy and kindness and understanding and being educated to the point of understanding our fellow man, which sounds so trivial or so Pollyanna, but to me, that's where it all begins. You know, Beatles said it, all you need is love. People laugh at that. Cynical people laugh at that. I think it's true. All you need is love. All you need is to just stand back, take a deep breath, and realize that we really are all the same. If that could be accomplished, imagine what the world would be like. But human beings haven't hit upon that little secret yet. We haven't gotten the key to that door yet. So I'm going to bring it right back and focus it to what is important for me. What's important for me is that the more I can share and hand over education, that will help people to understand what it's like to have a developmental delay or a differing ability, then the more likely we are going to have citizens that will come to your aid when needed. So what do I mean by that? Well, the children you're affecting today are the adults of tomorrow, and someday a group home is going to be proposed in their neighborhood. And if they have been educated, exposed, if they've been part of the empathic path, an understanding, getting to know somebody who's different from them in their way they express, manifest, and regulate, they're not going to be the person that says, no, we don't want that. They're not going to other someone with autism. So the more we can get in there at a young age and start helping people to understand and accept, that's going to be the big payoff is 20, 30 years down the road. And adults as well. The more we can educate, simple education, letting people know what you need in your neighborhood. I do that a lot. I tell people that all the time. I have parents that ask me, we have a new neighbor moving in. What do we do? The child has autism. What can I do to support that family? This isn't even anything to do with the skill set of autism. How about going over there with a dinner? You know, nothing wrong with that. Whatever dinner you're making, make another one. Bring it on over and say, welcome to the neighborhood. Or, hey, Wednesday night, I'm going to make dinner for you and your family. Because I get that it's a little stressful, not only raising your two kids, but your third child has autism, and that must be a lot to manage. It's those little things that make people aware that, oh, their life is a little bit different from mine because their child is manifesting and presenting different than mine and needs a different set of tools to regulate. And the more we can see that, I was great at exposing what I needed and what I was not great at asking for help, but I was definitely good at exposing what was happening with my son and letting people see the great accomplishments, but the things that were problematic for me. And it's so interesting how many people will step right up. People are good. People are good intrinsically. There's far, far, far more good people in the world than not. People want to be of service. They want to go home and feel like they've done something for someone else. And just that small something is bringing your child or bringing your autistic loved one into a new community with a set of eyes that is more understanding, that is more accepting. And that's what we want. So I'm on board with the Autism Awareness Month. You know, when my son was young, I created a lot of programming that I know affected a lot of the children that he was playing with at the time and that he encountered at the time. I know for a fact that attitudes were changed, ideas were changed. In many instances, whole careers when these children were grown were shaped by their experience with Anthony. I cannot tell you that I know a handful of people that went into special education because of the work they had done with Anthony when they were younger. I had mentioned before, and I will take a few minutes to describe the program again today, that when Anthony was 5 years old, I recognized he really did not have any real friends. I had well-meaning pals of my own who brought their kids over to play, but they would lose interest because at age 3 and age 4 and age 5, children want to play. They want to have interaction. They want to be connected. And that's a core deficit. Anthony didn't know how to connect. He didn't know how to play and to want. There's not an intrinsic knowledge on how to connect with the person, but Anthony wanted to connect. He was a loving kid and he did want to be a part of what everybody else was doing. So now it's up to me to figure out how to get him to learn how to do that. You know, there's so many, lots of people will say, well, you're changing your child. I don't know. Are you? I felt like I was working his brain like we would work somebody's limb. If your child had broken their leg, you wouldn't say, oh, well, you probably won't be able to ride your bike anymore. No, you bring them to the doctor, you get the cast, you bring them to the OT, you bring them to the PT, you do everything possible so that leg can function just the way it did before, or just like everybody else's leg, so they can ride the bike and have a great time with their friends. And so it wasn't a matter of me not being understanding or wanting my child to be someone different. It was a matter of me working his brain the way I felt you could work a limb. The most important part, how can I open his mind to new ways of thinking and doing so that he can get that urge for connectedness satisfied? And so when my son was 5 years old, it just dawned on me one day while we were watching the Barney show that he loved the kids on the Barney show. He was just beginning to talk at age 4, and he knew their names, and he liked their company. And I was wondering, what could I do that could bring that kind of connectiveness into his real life? And then it dawned on me that those children were 10 years old. They were not 4 years old and 5 years old. They were 10-year-old little actors pretending to be the age of my son. And I thought, what if I got a bunch of 10-year-olds in this house? And that's what I did. And it wasn't some sort of master's degree psychological planning. It was a mom watching a Barney show who thought, if I could get a bunch of 10-year-olds in here that would be willing to pretend they were Barney kids and work with my son in that way, that would be phenomenal. So I went to a 5th grade class, as I often say. I think they all wanted to do it because they wanted to get into my house. But regardless, they soon fell in love with the process. And for 1 year, I had 2 children each day that I would pick up after school that would come to be our backyard gang. And they were really adept. They loved it. They were 10. They got to relive their childhood. They got to play Candyland and swing on the swings and make sandcastles and activities that they wouldn't have been doing at age 10 with their peers. But they got to relive it. And they got to relive it while teaching another child. And I taught them what to do. I met with their parents. I gave them things to read. And I stood peripherally from them when they were with Anthony. And within a month or two, they didn't even need me anymore. They were almost like little therapists. And they got in there and taught Anthony so much: how to play, how to be on the swing, how to come down the slide, how to take turns, how to clean up after a snack, how to sing the song with them, how to do all the things, pretend play, things that were so hard for Anthony to do. In 1 year, did it change him into a, quote, typical child who could present as a great player of all activities? No, but he was in there and he knew what he liked and he knew how to respond. And he began making memories. And those memories and those skills went on for his lifetime, but we still talk about those days today. And so those children were involved in understanding, in realizing that Anthony was just like them, but he needed a little more help to get there. And so that's why the educational piece and the awareness piece is so, you can take that to the next level. It's so important. I had a lot of my, as you know, I was an educator, had a lot of my kids that had an elementary school at that point were older, late high school years and early college, called them up to be caregivers, babysitters while I was working a part-time job. And I started with one and it grew. I had a team all through Anthony's life from age 8 until he went into crisis at 16. We had a team of people in my house. They couldn't wait to come and watch Anthony. Now, of course, I would pay the kids, the going rate for watching Anthony, but I would come home sometimes and there'd be 3 more kids in the house. Somebody would have called and said, "What are you doing?" "We're baking cupcakes," and they would come over. They weren't looking for money. They were interested in the great work and they were seeing results. And there isn't any one of us who doesn't like to show up for any kind of work and who doesn't love seeing the results of what you're putting into it. And Anthony was great. He was a great feedback for them. And so I know we changed the attitudes and we changed the minds of so many people and young people that now are adults and carry that with them, if not in their careers, in their mindsets. Teachers, administration in our school districts. I did a simple thing. I started buying books for everybody. And 2 or 3 times a year, I would purchase 10 books and give them to the principal, to the assistant superintendent, to the superintendent. I remember getting a lovely note from the assistant superintendent that said, "This is the most incredible thing." Okay, it cost me a few dollars. But it was so worth it to say, you know what, right now we're working on this with Anthony, and here's a great book that outlines it. Here's a study that outlines it. You know how many teachers and administration were grateful, because in those days, it was kind of not on the front burner. So I always thought of a small way to get in there and to educate and to get people on board with the fact that Anthony has autism, as do many other people, but these are contributing members of our society, and they need the acceptance, the understanding. They need for you to be on board. I developed that program that I did with Anthony with kids in our school district as well. And so in our elementary schools, we had 5th grade buddies pairing with our K2 classes, as they were in those days, of children who mostly had developmental differing abilities, such as autism. And it was so successful. Tell you a little story. One day, Mom told me she was at the park with her daughter who was profoundly autistic, and she had minimal skills, was learning, was involved in our program at school, and quite comfortable with the kids. That was one of her great strengths. She was able to grow into being very comfortable. And so the mom was at the playground, and the little girl was in the sandbox. And 2 of the 5th grade girls that worked with her in school came over and they said, "Oh, hi." And they sat and they were playing and they were so kind. And the mother went over and said, "Do I know you?" The kid said, "Oh, are you her mom? And we work with her at school and we just love her." But the language they were using, it wasn't as if they were her mentors. It was almost as if they were her same age peers, but they weren't. And the child was probably 7 years old. And the kids were 10 and 11. And the mom called me and she was sobbing on the phone. She couldn't even get it through. And I've been there. I've been there. If I think about it long enough, I'll start crying, but I didn't want to cry in the podcast. She was sobbing on the phone. She said, "I just could not believe I was sitting like a typical mom at the playground. Oh, my daughter had friends, and maybe it wasn't the typical scenario of same age peers. And maybe there wasn't a lot of verbal exchanges. But she had a great time. And those kids were right in there playing with her. And that is going to be what we're going to see. The payback for that is in the great experience at present and what we're going to see as all of those kids get older. And those gals who may end up being a doctor, may end up being a teacher, may simply end up being the great hairdresser that understands how to cut the hair of children with autism, how to understand a person who comes in and is not able to handle sensory. That person is going to know what to do. So I'm on board with 30 days of telling everybody tips and giving ideas and doing some loose education. It was always twofold for me. Anthony always had friends. He always had great experiences. We worked so hard on trying to get him to verbalize his memories, and now he does it all by himself. He'll say, "Mom, remember when?" And he will tell me sometimes things that I don't even remember. He has an incredible memory. You have to remember also that children with any kind of differing ability, but I'm going to speak to autism, they see the world and understand the world and process the world in ways that we don't. That is something that's different about my son and I. I see things in one way or remember things in one way. I always say there are parts of my brain that aren't used, that in Anthony's brain are used. The things he remembers, the things he comes up with, his strength. And we're very grateful that he lives in a community where his strengths are built. They're building blocks for him. They see the strength and they create a program for him to excel and contribute, which is what we want. Educating for the future is so important. Educating the community for the future is so important. When we ask for help, we're more than likely to get it. You know, there's so many things now in our world, in our country, and budget cuts and how are children going to be cared for when they're adults. That's the thing that most people who have a child who won't be able to care for themselves, that's the thing that can keep you up at night. But we have a better chance of having people understand that better if they're involved right from the start. If they see that while there are differences, there really aren't any differences. It's just a different approach. A different approach. It's like learning a new language. It's like having a neighbor that speaks a different language. At some point, you're going to have to find some commonality so that you can converse or do or understand. It's a different language, but it's not a different kind of human being. It's simply a different language, a different process, a different protocol. The Autism Awareness Month sometimes has a little bit of a problem amongst people who don't like words like profound autism, and we all don't like the high functioning. Those are all such. They're harder terms. I'm more comfortable with profound. I like that. I think it's tells you right away what you're going to be up against in the level to which somebody can participate. But that's okay. That when Anthony was coming into his diagnosis, and people would say, if you've seen one child with autism, you've seen one child with autism. It's like the snowflake, no two are alike. And I used to think that was also a little bit of a flippant comment back in the day, but I don't think it's a flippant comment anymore. I think that's exactly right. And I think that nobody is categorizing people into levels. I think that you certainly can have an autistic diagnosis, a diagnosis of being on the spectrum or living with autism, or being affected by that in your life, but having that brain work to the extent that your participation in independent community is much higher. And we can't negate that all of that is there. We have to remember as a society that there are people that need help, that are not going to be able to be cared for. And they deserve the highest quality of life, as we all deserve. And there are other situations that we can be focused in on. But mine is autism, and this is an episode about autism, so I'm focusing in on that. There's nothing wrong with saying and knowing that there is a group, there is a population in that arc that's going to need more of what we as human beings have to give. as what we as a community have to give, as a neighborhood, as a city, as a state, as a country, as a planet. We have to keep continually working. And don't let our kids fool you. Don't ever think that where they've come is as far as they can go. I can say this about my son's development. When I started out, I was shooting for the stars. I didn't see what the alternative was. When Anthony was diagnosed, it was the late 90s, early 2000s. And at that point, there were a lot of parents writing books about how to cure autism. And so I came from the how can we cure autism parent group because I didn't know enough about it. And I thought that that could be possible. And I think I wanted it to be possible because who would want their child not able to live a life that you would want them to live of the highest quality with independence and grow as far as you would want them to grow? That's the wish of every single parent. And I guess soon into the journey, I don't think I thought it was going to be cured, but I did think I was going to give him the highest quality of life, to stretch him to the highest potential. But don't we do that with all children? Don't we think that way about all of our children? And so I would have people that would say to me, well, you don't think you can cure him, right? Or you don't think that he can go this far, arms up, and his language is so low. I had neurologists telling me that he wasn't going to speak. You have all sorts of people, I guess, trying to cushion you. And I didn't get it. I always thought, well, if your child is skating, say they're a skater and their goal is the Olympics, you don't say to them, well, you're probably only going to win a silver. No, you say you're going to win the gold. Do you think in your head that they may, or is it possible? It doesn't matter. That's what you're striving for. You're striving for the gold, and whatever they get, they get. Okay, you want to be comfortable if you win the bronze, that you've done the best job, and the best job for you is the bronze, and you're walking home with that medal. And that's how I felt. It didn't matter to me. I was going to shoot for the gold, and whatever we got, we were going to be proud of that. And his life was going to be more enriched by that. So keep going, because everything that people told me proved wrong. It proved wrong. Yes, did I want my child to have the independent life that a person without autism, like myself, that didn't have a brain that functioned differently? Did I want all that to be? Of course I wanted him to have it all, but my child was born with autism, and I did everything and continue to do everything possible to give him the best quality of life, and he rises to the occasion. So don't, and not all the time, but he rises to the occasion. So don't think this is as far as we can go. There's always something extra, and they'll surprise you, as we all surprise one another. When you think about it, it's all really the same. It's all really the same. Don't we all surprise our friends? Don't we all surprise our bosses? Don't we all surprise our coworkers with coming up with a great idea or being able to do the task at hand? Or, don't all of our children surprise us with something? The child that has stage fright is now the lead in the show, and you're afraid that they're going to crack when they're on stage, but they end up being the best thing ever. We all have the potential to take our life and our ingenuity and our creativity and our understanding another step farther. So don't think that things aren't possible. I think if you're a parent and a neighbor, a grandparent, a teacher, you have to have the all things are possible. You have to have the anything is possible attitude, the anything is possible mantra. And it's hard to hold on to it every day, 365, 24/7. But you have to try to do that because it's very true. Anything is possible. And the more we can educate and get people on our side to understand that we're all the same. We're all human beings. We look different. We act different. We walk different. We think different. But we all need the exact same thing. We need caring. We need help. We need to be watered, as they say. And we need a community around us. It takes a village. It doesn't take a village to raise a child. It takes a village for us to exist as human beings on this planet. We can get that through our head and then focus it back down in April for 30 days. I'm on board. It's a win-win for me. So I'm going to put out another suggestion. Check out my 8-episode series on my podcast called 1,000 Miles. It's my personal journey with my son. Lots of ideas, struggles, tips, things. It's an interesting story for somebody to listen to who has no connection to autism. And I think it's a very valuable story to listen to if you're on the autism journey on any part of the path. It's still Autism Awareness Month. And when we're out of April, it is going to be autism awareness every day if you're living with someone with autism. But there's a lot of blessings in that too. There's a lot of blessings in being able to see, being able to create, being able to encourage, being able to share. It's a win-win. Happy Autism Awareness Month, no matter what month you're listening to this podcast. And I'll see you next time at the Wish House.